Om Tavakatamratam Tapta Jivanam Kavihiridham Kalmashapaham Sharavana Mangalam Shrimadatam Bhuvikarnanti Bhurirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on page 81, beginning a new chapter, the Master's birthday celebration at Dakshineswar. And it is Sunday, February 18th, 1883. So that means that M has now been coming to Sri Ramakrishna approximately 1 year. We don't know the exact date when he first came. M didn't record that, but probably it was February or March at the latest. Sri Ramakrishna arrived at Govinda Mukherji's house at Belgharia near Calcutta. Besides Narendra, Ram and other devotees, some of Govinda's neighbors were present. The Master first sang and danced with the devotees. After the kirtan, they sat down. Many saluted the Master. Now and then he would say, "Bow before God." "It is God alone," he said, "who has become all this. But in certain places, for instance, in a holy man, there is a greater manifestation than in others. You may say there are wicked men also. That is true, even as there are tigers and lions. But one need not hug the tiger god. One should keep away from him and salute him from a distance. Take water for instance. Some water may be drunk, some may be used for worship, some for bathing, and some only for washing dishes." Now this statement, "It is God alone who has become all this," this is one of the favorite teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. It's very interesting that in the Upanishads we have two angles that we can look at things, especially from Advaita Vedanta. We can say that whatever we see is nothing but Brahman itself, or what we see is nothing but name and form superimposed upon Brahman. And there'll be some who will object, strict Advaitins, Brahman can't become anything. We say Brahman has become all this. Now, for Sri Ramakrishna, he would also agree that Brahman is not becoming all of this in the sense, and they use these illustrations, in the sense that milk can be turned into curd. There's an actual modification taking place of the milk, turning it into curd. It doesn't happen that way. Those who like this idea of some type of evolution or transformation of Brahman, they'll get around this a little bit by talking about Shakti, that it's the Shakti that evolves. There's something called Shakti Parinamavada, that everything we see is a manifestation of the divine power of Brahman. Now, Sri Ramakrishna will like that idea, because for him to say that everything is a manifestation of Shakti and everything is a manifestation of Brahman, it means the same thing for him, because he says Shakti and Brahman are non-different. The same ultimate reality. So in the Upanishads, we do have this idea that Brahman is the material cause of the universe as well as the instrumental cause of the universe. So that means that Brahman is not separate from the material. The material cause really means the building blocks of the universe. It's kind of a refutation of the Sankhya idea that there is something called Prakriti that has an independent existence or separate existence. Some dependence on Purusha is there, but an independent existence. So it's not that Brahman will take the building blocks and add one to the other and combine them and everything, and then we'll get this universe. In the Upanishads we get this idea that Brahman will project this universe out of its own self, so that just as the spider, when the spider will create the web, the spider's web, that the material, the web itself, the thread, comes out of the spider itself. It belongs to him. It's not that the spider goes in search of something. It's not like a bird that has to look for straw to put together to make a nest. That it comes out of the spider itself. And in the Upanishads, we do have this idea that Brahman will really create the building blocks. That means the 5 elements. That when Brahman thinks, may I be many, that the universe doesn't come into existence all at once. This, of course, is one theory. But we find this common theory in the Upanishads that first will be created the different elements. Akasha and Vayu and all the 5 elements that we have, and each one will combine with the other, and then we'll get this whole universe. But for Sri Ramakrishna, this was more as something of his own experience, because whatever he saw it as a manifestation of the divine. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, in this one small paragraph, he's using this concept in 2 different ways. One is whatever we see is Chinmaya. Whatever we see is nothing but that consciousness taking some type of apparent tangible form, visible form, or even touchable form that way. The other is that whatever we think of this universe and whatever we think of living beings, that divine presence dwells within each and every being. So we have 2 things. We look at an individual, and we can say that this human body, well, it came from another human body. We don't have to think too hard about the physical aspect of it, but we can say that however it was created, that it was created in such a way that there's a mind there that can reflect the divine presence, or there's a heart that can be a home for that divine presence, and God dwells within all beings. So Sri Ramakrishna is saying both of these. So it is God alone who's become all this. But then he'll talk about a greater manifestation. Now, this greater manifestation, now he's talking about God dwelling within all beings. And manifestation will have to do with the degree to which that divine power is present. So there'll be a degree in power. Or if we're thinking about just the degree to which the Lord himself is present within all beings, that's the same in everyone, but covered over in different ways by different people. So we may all have the light bulb with pure light within us. Some of us will have a larger light bulb than others. So that'll be Shakti. He'll say Shakti Vishesh. There'll be a difference in the degree of the divine power. Then on the other hand, we all may have that light there, but some of us may have very dark lampshades covering it. So we don't see much light coming out. This will be the tamas and rajas dwelling within the mind that will prevent that divinity from being visible to everyone, even the individual. So Thakur will often say that we have to be practical people, that we may say God dwells within the tiger as well. So he would say yes, but on that account you can't go and embrace the tiger. The tiger will destroy you. And this goes with the people too. We have to be very practical people. We don't look down upon anyone. We'll see there are certain people that we see in excess of tamas and rajas. Not that we want to be judgmental, but we know that. We know that they have tendencies to be harmful to other people. And we won't say that God doesn't dwell within them, but we'll say that that divinity is being covered over by layer after layer of tamas and rajas. And we know for ourselves personally that it's not good for us to keep their company. So we can say, yes, I'll salute from a distance. I'll recognize the divinity within them, but I'll recognize also that my constitution is not so strong that it won't be affected by somebody else. And if I keep the company of certain people that have these very strong tendencies, I may be affected by that, and it won't be helpful for me. Or I may be in a state of anger, and I have a reaction, and I won't enjoy their company. So he's saying that on the one hand, everything we see is nothing but Brahman, taking this form or with name and form superimposed on it, but the essence of it, the source of it, is nothing but Brahman. Everything can be traced back to Brahman. But when it comes to living beings, and this will extend to animals to a certain extent, even to plants. Some people will say to a certain extent even minerals and things, but that divine presence is there. The way we can understand it, of course, is this reflection theory, that there are different types of materials that can reflect light. And some will be a very clear reflection. We have a mirror, then the sun can be reflected in water, it'll be a little murky. And if the sun falls on a very dark surface, then there's no reflection at all. It gets completely absorbed, if we think of black asphalt or something. Does that mean that the light of the sun is not present there? It's present, but it can't be reflected there. So unless there's some nervous system at the very minimum to accept or be able to reflect that divine light, then we won't see the presence of it there. But it's present everywhere. Electricity can be accessed anywhere, but unless there's a device for it, unless there's a light bulb with filament inside and everything, and the plug and all of that, the electricity won't manifest itself as light. So this is, and these are statements that Thakur makes all of the time. And we have to be clear that there are two different meanings. Everything is Chinmaya. That means that it all reduced back to consciousness in Brahman. It doesn't mean that everything is conscious. These are two different things. Some people will say, well, is there consciousness in this table? Well, consciousness as Brahman will be the ground and underlying everything. It doesn't mean that the table can think. It doesn't have a brain. There's no nervous system there. So Chinmaya and Chid are two different things. But the individual, the real self, is Brahman itself. It's not a manifestation. It's Brahman itself. In the dream, the dream world that we see is a projection of the mind of the dreamer, of that cosmic mind. It's just a projection. But we can say in the dream that no chair is really a chair. It wasn't made of wood and everything. That it's really consciousness itself. And yet, the actor in the dream is not a projection of the dreamer. Because when we wake up, the dreamer won't say that, oh, I dreamt this person. No, it was myself. I dreamt that I did it. It's the actual I. It's an actual identity. This is not manifestation. It's identity. So there's a very subtle distinction here when Thakur talks about seeing everything, that Brahman has become everything, and seeing that God dwells within all beings, seeing the self in all beings, seeing Rama in all men, Sita in all women. Both of these were experiential things for Sri Ramakrishna. This is the important thing, that the mystic can have that direct experience, and we can just imagine how wonderful it is to see everything as divine, and to see each and every individual as God himself, or God herself, dwelling within all living beings. At the same time, we may worship the divinity in all, but be cautious, because as I say, this covering can be very thick and can really distort that divinity within. A neighbor: revered sir, what are the doctrines of Vedanta? Now, I've mentioned several times that they're code words in the gospel. This means, probably for the questioner, and definitely for Sri Ramakrishna, it means the Upanishads, and specifically Advaita Vedanta. Even today, it's used very casually in that way. If somebody says that I'm a Vedantin, generally we take it to mean that they're non-dualists. If they're qualified non-dualist, followers of Ramanuja, they may say, I'm a devotee of Rama, or a devotee of Krishna. There'll be different ways of expressing it. They won't necessarily say, yes, I'm a Vedantist, because it may be misunderstood. Even though they have every right to claim it. They trace their teachings back to the Upanishads. Even the strict dualism of Madhva, he'll claim that he finds the authority for that in the Upanishads also, so they can also claim that we're Vedantins. But for Sri Ramakrishna, when he'll give the answer to this, he'll take that question as meaning that what are the doctrines of Advaita Vedanta? We know that from the answer he gives. Master, the Vedanta says, I am he, so the qualified non-dualist won't say that, and the dualist definitely won't say that. They may at most say that I'm a part of God. This will be the qualified non-dualist, or I come from God, I belong to God for the dualist. So this is the first part, I am he. Then, Brahman is real and the world illusory. Now, again, this illusory, this term that's used in Vedanta is a mithya. And we have our schools of Vedanta, especially Shankaracharya and Gaudapada. Shankaracharya is the Guru's Guru, who wrote that famous Karika on the Mandukya Upanishad. And there'll be so many schools like that. A lot of the texts that we'll read, Ashtavakra Samhita and things like that, they'll emphasize this idea that this world is some type of illusion. And sometimes the analogy goes far as a dream. So Swapnavat, this term comes up very often in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Swapnavat, like a dream. Now, do we take this literally? If we take it literally, then that means that nothing has any separate, individual, independent reality. Everything is just a manifestation of consciousness, or we can say really this divine consciousness or mind, cosmic mind. Because when we have a dream, we don't assume that there really are tables and chairs in the dream. It's all just imagination. So there'll be some who take it that way. Then the more logical way and what really is the more traditional explanation is that these are not strictly illusory that way, pratibhasika, but vyavaharika. That means that on this relative plane we can accept the reality of them and the reality of other individuals, that it has some, this external world has on this level some separateness. We can recognize the manifoldness, the variety within this divine play. But we've mistaken it. We're not seeing things rightly. So the tree stump in the dark, when the thief comes out of the house and sees it, he thinks that it's the policeman waiting for him. When the lover comes out, he thinks, my beloved is waiting for me. The same one, the same tree trunk that they're seeing is interpreted differently, and both are wrong. It's actually just a tree trunk. So there's some superimposition that takes place. This is if you have a Vyavaharika point of view, but there's something there. It's not pure illusion. It's not just something completely imagined. It's not like an oasis that we see in the desert, a mirage. When we go there, there's nothing there but sand. Now we may say that, well, it's the heat waves that are coming up, they give the appearance of all of that, but aside from that, there's nothing necessarily there. And the real Vedantic point of view is that when we go up and examine the snake, we don't see that, there was nothing there at all. We see that, it was a rope that we thought was a snake. So it's not that I just imagined something there for no reason whatsoever, but that reality is there. So I am seeing this Brahman, but not understanding that I'm seeing it that way. This is the Vyavaharika point of view. Paramarthika point of view, the highest point of view, is when we don't see the manifold at all. And that's not really a point of view. That's the ultimate truth, and that we experience in Samadhi itself, when there's only oneness. Or in the mystical vision, see, for Sri Ramakrishna, he could see variety and oneness at the same time. There are philosophers of mysticism that question, can we see both God and the world at the same time? Logically, we would say it's one or the other. Either we're seeing the snake or we're seeing the rope. But for Sri Ramakrishna, it was so clear to him that it was a rope, even though he could see the form of the snake, that we could say both. When he said, I see everything as consciousness, he was seeing individual things. And he gave the illustration of artificial fruit made of wax. In those days, that was the common way to make artificial fruit. That he was seeing that it was wax, that it was all one substance. And yet he could see the individual fruits. He could see that one is a banana, one is an orange, one is an apple. So in some sense, this dual vision of Sri Ramakrishna was always there. He was always aware of the divinity, and at the same time of the divinity manifesting as variety. So this is the mystical view, mystical vision of Sri Ramakrishna. So this is his answer. What are the doctrines of Vedanta? That I am He. Brahman is real and the world is illusory. Now, for Sri Ramakrishna, if he's giving his own point of view, now he wasn't asked, what is your point of view? He's asked, what is the point of view of the Advaitins? In his own point of view, he'll substitute anitya. We've seen that over and over again. That rather than think that this world is some type of illusion, that it doesn't exist, that it's an imagination, that think of it as it's constantly changing, anitya, that nothing to hold on to. Or when he says avastu, that he doesn't mean that there's no substance to it in the materialistic sense, but there's nothing substantial about this world, nothing that can fulfill the desire and needs of the heart of all of us. In that sense, avastu. So this is the first thing. I am He, Brahman is real and the world is illusory, number 2. And then he says, even the I is illusory, only the Supreme Brahman exists. Now, Sri Ramakrishna's understanding of this I, he takes it from 2 points of view. From the philosophical or metaphysical point of view, he will agree with this. It's not real. Anything that's real has to be permanent, and there has to be some permanent substance to it. So he'll say from the highest point of view that this I is not real. And if we examine ourselves, and he tells us to do that, try to find this I, we see that some vague idea comes before our mind, some picture of who we think we are. There's nothing substantial there. But on the other hand, he'll say that even though it's just an idea, that it's a very deep-rooted idea, and that it doesn't leave us, and we can't live in this world without the sense of I. Even the Advaitin has a sense of I, sense of who he or she is, self-identity. So he'll give this idea, even the I is illusory, only the Supreme Brahman exists. Now, there's another way to get around this, that in Vedanta, there are very strict rules for what can be considered to be existing. For something to be real, it has to be permanent. It has to exist in the past, present, and future. And with a Brahman, it really means it transcends time. There is no past, present, or future, but there's no conceivable time in which a Brahman doesn't exist, so it's real. Anything else, if it exists for a certain period of time, that means that at one time it didn't exist, but it came into existence. And if it can come into existence, it can go out of existence. And if it ever can go to a point where it doesn't exist, then we say that the reality of it is questionable, even when we said it did exist. So they have a very strict pramana, standard, by which to judge whether something exists or not. It has to be always existent, permanently existing. So from that point of view, this I doesn't exist that way, only Brahman will exist. So this means we can accept the temporary existence of other things, and accept the fact that when we depart from this world, we can even question what is the status of things that we took to be the world for us. We're living in a different world with other visible things in a different loka. We don't know what takes place there. Do we feel then like that was all a dream and we woke up from it? Maybe. But we can also think that, well, it's real to the extent that other people are still there and experiencing it, and it has some objective reality. Different ways of looking at these things, different schools of thought. I remember in the introduction to the Upanishads by Swami Atmajnanananda, he makes a very interesting distinction. He talks about subjective idealism and objective idealism. Subjective idealism will say that everything exists as a projection of my mind. That means that it doesn't matter, even the other person is a projection of my mind. Objective idealism, he says that if it's a projection out of the mind of God, then it has some commonality to it. Everyone can see the same universe, that there's some objectivity to it. And he takes this as the real meaning of this, that Brahman alone is real, and that everything Brahman alone has become all this, or is manifested as all of this. It's a nice way of looking at it. I like that idea. Objective idealism still can be traced back to consciousness itself, but it's a common world that we live in. We can accept the existence of other people, that we're viewing the same thing, we're actually talking to each other. In a dream, are we really talking to other people? It seems like it. Then we wake up and we think, no, that was the illusion of the dream, that there really was a second person I was talking to. We can go and call that person and say, I apologize for what I said to you in the dream last night. They'll think we're crazy. They say, it was just a dream, I wasn't there. So this objective idealism will allow us to believe, yes, the other person is there. I am talking to a person. Now, this will be the critical point for Sri Ramakrishna. He says, but the I cannot be got rid of. So this but, what does that mean? That means that he's not refuting the other idea. He's saying, yes, it's true that this I is illusory. It has no absolute existence. At the same time, we can't get rid of it. It's not absolutely real, but we can't get rid of it because it's Maya. This is what allows us to live in the world. Everybody has an ego. Some are very tamasic and rajasic, some are very sattvic, some are pure, sattva, some are fully ripened. There's a whole huge gradation. When Thakur talks about this ripe and unripe ego, we know when a fruit ripens that it goes through many, many stages. The banana will be green and hard one day, next day a little bit less, and then more and more, then it'll get freckles on it, and the next thing you know, it's a banana bread, fully ripened. So this ego is like that also. It's not that it just will automatically jump overnight from unripe to ripe. But this ego cannot be got rid of, so what do? Are we stuck that we'll never realize our oneness with Brahman? He says, no, but the ego, the I cannot be got rid of. Therefore, it is good to have the feeling, I am the servant of God, his son, his devotee. This is the uniqueness of Sri Ramakrishna's Bhakti Yoga, of his dualistic approach to things. He is not a dualist. A dualist will say this is the truth. It's not true that this I is illusory. This I is real, that I'm a jiva, you're a jiva, we're separate. Even the state of liberation will be separate. Thakur never says that. What he says is that we all have this feeling. And since we have that feeling that we are separate and we are individuals and we were born and will die and we dwell within the body, all of that, then we can utilize that. This is the practical attitude that Sri Ramakrishna had. This is that idea that, yes, it falls within Maya, but we cannot get rid of Maya without the help of Maya. This is, we can't get rid of the bad tendencies of the mind without the exertion of the mind itself. The mind belongs to Maya, but we utilize that higher side of the mind. We utilize the intelligence, the power of analysis and discernment and everything in order to rid ourselves of the lower elements of the mind, which are a mixture of all of the passions and desires and old samskaras and everything. So, but the I cannot be got rid of. Therefore, it is good to have the feeling, I am the servant of God, his son, his devotee. Any one of the different attitudes, it doesn't matter. Thakur is saying that if we have any one of these attitudes, it frees us from the other type of I, which is only concerned with the body and with enjoyment and with power and lust and greed and success and all of the other things that represent bondage for us. So this type of I frees us from bondage. That's why he calls it Vidyamaya. It frees us from that, and just as desires keep us in bondage, and desire for God frees us from that. It belongs to a different category. So this type of I belongs to a different category, because there's no ahankara in the sense of pride with this type of I. If there's a pride, it's a good pride. Yes, I too have a mother. Huh? There's a good type of pride. It's not the pride that says, I'm so wealthy, I am so intelligent. That's the pride that gets us in trouble. The pride that says, yes, I'm proud to be a servant of Rama. Huh? That what could be a source of pride than to be able to say that, yes, I am protecting Rama, I am serving him. So the Hanuman idea. But it frees us from this other type of pride. I'm nobody if I'm not the servant. So this is that wonderful part. Somebody said to Swami Premananda once that Thakur made all of you so great. And he said, no, he made us all nobodies. Huh? He freed us from that ego, from the pride of that ego. That was the greatness of all the direct disciples. We were reading the other day about Swamiji, and there were a couple of different things that he made a statement. I don't remember what it was. It's Swami Yogananda. That he kind of corrected him a little bit. You remember what it was? About the first Durga Puja or Holy Mother, something like that. And Swamiji immediately said, yes, brother, you're right.
Not making Holy Mother popular.
Yes, about popularizing Holy Mother, making her. Swami Yogananda said, but brother, remember, when Thakur said, when many people come to know of my divinity, it'll be a sign that it's time for me to leave. Won't it be the same with Holy Mother? And Swamiji said, yes, brother, you're right. I hadn't thought about it that way. Look at the humility of Swamiji. Huh? The Swamiji who people are lauding as a god on earth. And his brother disciple corrects him with this small thing, and immediately Swamiji says, yes, you're right, brother. Yeah, we should be very protective of Holy Mother that way. So they all, no matter how much pride and strength and everything they had in their ability, Atma Shraddha, faith in themselves, they had this tremendous humility. Another thing with Swamiji, I always remember this incident. He was somewhere, maybe in Gujarat or Rajasthan, one of those places, and he was in a meeting with all of the great Sanskrit Pandits. So he had no choice but to speak Sanskrit with them. Now these Pandits, they're learning Sanskrit and speaking Sanskrit from their childhood. Swamiji, he had a Western education. He learned Sanskrit, of course, and knew it quite well, wrote beautiful poetry and everything, but he wasn't a Pandit like the others. He wasn't used to having these philosophical discussions and arguments in Sanskrit itself. So very often he'll make some grammatical mistakes, and some of the Pandits laughed at him, and Swamiji himself laughed. He could have taken it so far. We would have been so embarrassed and taken it so personally. And Swamiji didn't care. So he was free from that type of ego, and yet at the same time, yes, we can do anything. We're the servants. So we have to see the subtle distinction here, that this ripe ego can have a tremendous type of pride to it, in a very good sense, but it'll be free from that worldly type of pride completely. So Thakur gives us a few of these different attitudes. I am the servant of God. He liked this Dasya Bhava, and I am the son of God. This he used to call Shontar Bhava. This isn't one of the 5 typical Vaishnava attitudes. This is the attitude of the Shakta, looking upon God as it says his son. It really should be her son. In Bengali, there's no his or her. So in English, we have to just try to guess which one sounds better. But whenever he's thinking of the son, he's thinking of looking upon God as mother, or simply as devotee. That means any other attitude we have. For the Kali Yuga, the path of bhakti is especially good. So not the only path, especially good. Why? One can realize God through bhakti too. Okay, so we don't have to go through all of the other difficult things. It's not that we say, well, through bhakti, I can have some vision of God, this and that, but I'll never realize the ultimate truth of Vedanta, that Brahman alone is real, and this world is insubstantial. This I is just some idea that I'll never realize that. At most, I'll become a great devotee of God. I'll always have this dualistic relationship. Thakur says no. Through bhakti also we can have the same highest realization. We can get to the roof, all the way to the top of the ladder. There's no false roof that we get to, that the Advaitin will be able to go to a higher roof. We'll get to the ultimate goal there. One can realize God through bhakti too. As long as one is conscious of the body, one is also conscious of objects. Okay, so some people will say that, yes, this world is just a projection of the mind. Then we have to go back and say, well, then your body is a projection of the mind. And if the body is, then what about the brain? It also has to be a projection of, then we get stuck. So if we accept that consciousness of the body, then we have to be conscious of external objects also. And the false identification with the body, we also falsely identify with objects. We identify with the car that we drive, the house that we live in, the clothes that we wear. These are part of our identity from this psychological point of view. Form, taste, smell, sound, and touch. These are the objects. It is extremely difficult to get rid of the consciousness of objects, and one cannot realize I am he as long as one is aware of objects. This I am he is an internal thing. This I am he, we're not talking about my oneness with this external universe. That may come afterwards. But when we're talking about getting to the roof and the highest jnana, we're not talking about vijnana now, the highest jnana, that will be when we're not even aware of anything. When we realize that state of samadhi and this I completely disappears and we merge 100% with that reality, which is the real self. When we come down a little bit from that, then we may say, now I see everything as divine. I'm seeing objects, but I know that there's a play of the divine. That'll be different. But in order to get there, we have to be able to withdraw the mind from everything. And not that the jnani will spend all day looking at a chair and trying to figure out how I'm not looking at an object, I'm looking at Brahman itself. We'll go crazy. What does it mean? We're looking at consciousness itself. It won't make sense to us. But to realize this I within, the real I within, there's no I there. There's nothing personal there. If there's nothing personal there, this pure awareness, then it'll be he. It'll be God at the same time, but I'm aware of it. That his awareness and my awareness are the same awareness. So this I doesn't work exactly, and the he doesn't work exactly. So we say soham. It's something beyond. It's beyond. This is so, and the aham. Is it neither one nor the other? So is it Brahman or is it Atman? Is it the highest reality or is it my very own self? It's neither and it's both. Sometimes Thakur will say it's beyond the one and two, or it's in between existence and non-existence. He'll use that type of language. It's something that can only be experienced within the depths of one's own consciousness. The sannyasi is very little conscious of worldly objects. Now, Thakur is saying this because generally if he will encourage anyone to follow the path of Jnana Yoga, strict Jnana Yoga, he'll say that, okay, but it's really for those who have some tremendous dispassion and have no interest in engaging in the world and getting married and having a family and having a career. It's really for the sannyasi. And traditionally it was. The Upanishads traditionally were meant for the sannyasins. The fourth stage of life and the fourth category of the Vedas all were meant for each other. You know, the Vedas, we have the Samhita portion, Brahmana portion, and the Aranyaka portion, that for those who or the Vanaprasthas, those who go into the forest, and then the Upanishads, and it corresponds a little bit to the four stages of life. So the Upanishads were meant for the sannyasins, either those who took from a young age into sannyasa, or those who took sannyasa at the end of life. So the sannyasi is very little conscious of worldly objects, or should be. Or if one wants to be a sannyasi, he should be very little conscious of worldly objects. Or if one wants to follow the path of Jnana Yoga, then it's helpful if one is a sannyasi. But the householder is always engrossed in them. So not necessarily attached, but at the same time, it can't be free from earning money and having a house and property and all of that. It comes with being a householder. It's the duty of a householder. So it's impossible for them to live the same type of lifestyle that the sannyasin can live. The sannyasi can really have no possessions. In ancient India, especially, or not even ancient India, traditional India, the sannyasi will wander from place to place, will have no permanent home. They'll go someplace and there'll be a nice shady tree and they'll sleep under the tree. Or there'll be different people, they'll have some garden someplace and they'll keep it open so any sannyasi can go and stay in somebody's garden, and they may even provide food for them. Or any temple, they can go and take shelter in a temple, but they have no place of their own, nothing that they can call their own, nothing but God that they can call their own. But the householder is always engrossed in them. Therefore, it is good for him to feel, I am the servant of God, or the child of any of the relationships. So he's saying that path of Bhakti Yoga, which requires a relationship, which requires a particular bhava, a particular attitude, and even a particular type of superimposition of an ideal upon oneself. That I want to practice Vatsalya Bhava, then I start imagining myself to be Mother Yashoda. How would she feel? What is in the heart of Mother Yashoda when she's bathing the baby Gopala? I try to imagine that. I try to superimpose that. I stamp that on my mind so that I have that same feeling that she had. How did Hanuman feel when he felt that it was up to him to rescue Sita for Rama? The whole mind was there. How can I feel like that? So this we superimpose that bhava, that the mindset and feeling of these paradigms that we have: Mother Yashoda, Hanuman, Radha for Krishna, any of them, Subala for Govinda, any of them, and we utilize that. So we feel that. He says therefore it is good for us to feel, I am the servant of God. Neighbor, sir, we are sinners. What will happen to us? Now this idea of being sinners, we find it in two different sources. Those Western educated Bengalis of the day, who were greatly influenced by missionaries, many of them studied in missionary schools, they were bombarded with this idea that with original sin and everything, that we're all born sinners. The other will be this very Hino-Dina attitude, this very of the Vaishnava tradition, that we're nobodies, we're nothing, that we're the lowest creatures, and all we can do is pray to Lord Krishna for please save us, please save us. So these will be the two main ones. Of course, every tradition and every individual can have that feeling, and of course some people actually probably did many things that we would consider sinful things, that engaged in lying and maybe immoral activities and everything. So some people had a good right. We take Girish Ghosh. He said that even the place where I sit, no one should sit there. I'm such a sinful person. That the mountain of sin was as high as Mount Meru. That he used to use that type of language. Thakur's idea was, yes, you may have done things which you shouldn't have done, but that doesn't stamp you as a sinner. The real self, it can't be stamped. The real self is always pure and perfect. It's just this mind. And if we can get rid of this idea of sin in the mind and get rid of those tendencies to do those types of things, then the mind will become pure. Because Thakur says the mind is like linen that's already been washed before it's going to be dyed. He says like a cloth that's come back from the washerman and is ready to be dyed. It has to be washed first. So he said the mind is like that the mind can take on. It's not that it's stained and we have to get rid of that stain of the mind, but we feel that it's like that. We feel this is just our conception that it's been stained by all of the sinful things we've done. Of course, we've created samskaras, and our personality has been formed by that. But when he talks about the mind, it's almost the same as talking about the self. The self can't be stained that way. And if we want to stain it, if we want to dye it, then we dye it in positive thoughts. We dye it in the divinity, which is its real nature. So the neighbor says, "Sir, we are sinners. What will happen to us?" "Master, all the sins of the body." Now, very often he'll say, "Don't call yourselves sinners." Sometimes he'll get a little upset. What is it with you people? That all you do is say, "I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner." If you think of yourself as a sinner, you'll become a sinner. Here he's taking a different approach. He says, "All the sins of the body fly away if one chants the name of God and sings his glories. The birds of sin dwell in the tree of the body." It's a very beautiful idea. They're not part of the tree. They dwell in the tree. They're not part of the tree. They can be made to fly away. Singing the name of God is like clapping your hands. As at a clap of the hands, the birds in the tree fly away. So do our sins disappear at the chanting of God's name and glories. This was Thakur's practice, especially first thing in the morning, when he would go around and he would look at all of the holy pictures in his room, and he would chant the divine name, and he would clap his hands like that. So we have that nice story that when Totopuri came, that he saw Thakur doing that, clapping his hands. Now in some parts of India, when they make chapatis, they'll use a rolling pin. In some parts of India, especially in Punjab, he was from Punjab, that they'll take it and they'll go back and forth. Each time they do it like throwing up a pizza in the air, with a pizza pie, they'll go back and forth like that. So Totopuri would tease him and say, "What are you doing? Are you making chapatis?" Huh? But for Thakur, the chanting of the name of God and clapping his hands, all the birds of sin would fly away. Not that he had to do it that way, but it was a joyful thing. The point for him was that it was a joyful thing. Very often he would dance. First thing in the morning, the devotees would be in the room. They see Thakur had gotten up, it may be 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's singing and dancing and clapping his hands and going to the pictures and chanting the name, just filled with joy. Who wakes up like that? Huh? We wake up and say, "Oh my God, is it time to get up? Can I sleep another 5 minutes?" But he didn't like to sleep. He couldn't wait to get up, and just filled with joy. So our sins disappear at the chanting of God's name and glories. And Thakur loved this idea. If any time somebody came back from visiting a holy man, and Thakur would say, "Well, what advice did he give?" And if he said, "Chant the name of God, chant the name of Rama, or chant the name of Krishna," Thakur would say, "Ah, wonderful." He would never say, "That's all that he said." What a simple thing, everybody knows that he would say, "Wonderful." So Thakur put great emphasis on the power of the name of God. Because for us, the name is the one thing that signifies the reality of God more than anything else. We may say, well, we picture an image in our minds also. Yeah, we do that to a certain extent. But even an ordinary thing, if we say the word mother, just think of the emotions that come up with uttering the word mother. It brings to the mind more than anything else, the totality. Even a picture, it'll have to be from a certain age and a certain time and a certain place and all of that. But the name gives us everything. So there's something special about the relationship between the name and the one named. So in Vedanta, they'll very often say that there's no difference. The name of God and God himself are one. And they'll put great emphasis on the name of God. We know the story that once Krishna was, they do a thing sometimes where someone will offer to give the amount of gold equivalent to the weight of the body. And they'll have these huge scales with huge pans, and the person can sit on one side, and the other side, whatever it is. If it's not gold, it can be rice, whatever. They'll keep putting it more and more on until that pan is heavier. Then they'll know that that's the weight of the person. So they were doing it with Sri Krishna. He was sitting on one side. No matter how much they put on the other side of the pan, Krishna was heavier. So then Rukmini was there, and she said, "Get rid of everything." He said, "I know what to do." And she took a tulsi leaf, and she wrote the name of Krishna on it. And she put that tulsi leaf on the other side of the pan, and immediately it went down. So she said, "See, the name of Krishna is greater than Krishna himself." These are just ways of showing how, in the devotional schools in general, how much emphasis and how much of a devotional attitude there is towards the name of God. That it's something very sacred. Again, you find that the water of a reservoir dug in a meadow is evaporated by the heat of the sun. Likewise, the water of the reservoir of sin is dried up by singing of the name and glories of God. So what he's saying is that we're taking this as an ocean of sin. We're taking this as, this is my nature, that I can't get rid of this. This is who I am, that I'm a sinner. And Thakur is saying that this is just on the surface. On the surface, we may look at, we dig a small reservoir in the meadow. It may just be a foot deep of water. We look at it and we have no way of knowing. It could be a very deep lake. It could be that the sun will never dry it up. And yet we find that at the end of the day it's all gone. We realize it was just a superficial thing. There was no depth to it. So Thakur is saying that what we're calling sin is something that if we recognize it, if we say that this belonged to my past, I'm not that person that committed those things, I won't do them again. That was the main thing for Thakur. Yes, admit you did it, but just take a vow that I won't do that again, then we're free from it. Now, it's not that simple, of course, because the tendency of the mind doesn't change overnight, but we understand the concept of it at least. You must practice it every day. So this is the thing. It's not that we do it once. That some skaras are very, very deep. In order to get rid of them or to change them or create new ones, we have to constantly do it over and over again. I remember a statement that Swami Swananji used to make, and I believe he quoted Swami Yatishwaranandaji, that someone had asked him, what is it with this japa that we're repeating the same thing over and over and over again? Why we have to keep repeating it over and over and over again? And then he said, think how many times you've told yourself, not in so many words, but you've pounded this idea into your mind, I am the body, I am the body, I am the body. So to counteract that, we have to do it over and over and over again. Now the name of God, of course, those who really have this attitude, they'll say, well, you just repeat it once, the name of God. If once I've taken the name of Hari or Durga, how can sin cling to me? There were beautiful songs like that. There's one story, I don't remember who it was, one great saint. He had left the village for the day and he left his son in charge of things. And people used to come to him. They would confess to him and their problems and ask for advice. So somebody came to the son and he had done something, and the son said, okay, repeat the name of Rama twice and you'll be free from the sin. Then the father came back and asked him what happened during the day, and he told him. And he gave his son a scolding. He said, you have such little regard for the name of God that you said he had to repeat it twice. Once would have been enough. But this is just to show this reverence for the name of God. In reality, we have to practice these things over and over and over again. Holy Mother, of course, put so much emphasis on japa. Japat siddhi, we hear this expression all of the time. Through japa, we can attain the highest realization. And we have to have deep meditation. The idea is that the name of God has a power of its own. It's better if we concentrate, of course. But Holy Mother used to say, whether you jump in the river or you're pushed in, you'll get wet either way. So there'll be some effect, of course, repeating the name of God, but we should be aware that of repeating the name of God, what it stands for. That it brings the idea of God himself or herself to our minds when we repeat the name. So you must practice it every day. The other day at the circus, I saw a horse running at top speed with an English woman standing on one foot on its back. How much she must have practiced to acquire that skill. Thakur mentions this at different places, that she's riding on a horse and there's a big hoop, and when they get to the hoop, she jumps up and goes through the hoop, and the horse goes underneath it, and she lands again on one foot. He was very impressed that she could do it, this English woman. Bibi, they call her, I don't know. Is that some term? You know that term? Anyhow. How much she must have practiced to acquire that skill. And really it's true that we can accomplish so many things through practice. We look at these athletes, that how they develop the skills that they have, these dribbling skills and everything. They'll do it day and night. They'll have far more devotion and spend far more time in the practice than we do as spiritual seekers. They have a different goal in mind, of course, but it just shows this abhyasa yoga, this abhyasa, this constant practice, that the tremendous results that it can yield. Weep at least once to see God. Thakur was, whenever he heard that any of his disciples wept for God, he was very, very happy. That, and then this goes back to this idea of sin. He used to say that the tears of the eyes will cleanse the dirt of the heart, will wash away all the dirt of the heart. These then are the two means: practice, abhyasa yoga, and passionate attachment to God, anuraga. That is to say, restlessness of the soul to realize Him, vyakulata. Now we have two in Gita, the two things will be this abhyasa yoga and vairagya. Now Thakur doesn't make a big distinction between vairagya and anuraga, even though they're opposite. One means complete dispassion for the world, but Thakur said dispassion for the world has to have the other side, this passion for God. And when that passion becomes so great that we feel that we can't live another moment without realizing God, then anuraga turns into vyakulata. This is one of the, probably the most important teaching of Sri Ramakrishna, that through this intense longing for God realization, we can have the highest type of experience. This is the most important tool that we have. This is the real critical, if we look at for cause and effect, everything is a secondary cause for Sri Ramakrishna. All of our spiritual practices, everything is meant to increase this vyakulata, this longing for God, and that longing itself will take us to God. That's the final rung of the ladder, he says. Okay, let us stop here then, and then Thakur after this will have his meal with the devotees, and then we'll continue with that conversation. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanugham Bhathuravikramai Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the Divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace unto all. Thank you, everyone. Everyone, please stay well, and we will see you next time.